for me. How to venture.
I'll let you have the first question.
There's time for it.
We need to talk.
There's only one question and there's no answer.
What's that?
There's only one question and there's no answer.
What am I? Is that it?
What is this?
Oh, what is this? And what am I is already asking too much, because, or,
Well, you're partializing.
That's part of it.
Unless you're using I to include everything, which would be jumping to the answer. If you're including everything with I, then you don't need to ask the question.
okay, but we were doing the exercise earlier of looking at my astrology chart, right? And so there is a sense of a partialized system and a subjective sense of an I that is partialized, right?
No.
No?
No, those flavors are present, but there's no partialization. It's a very strange aspect of this stuff here is that how can I possibly put this into words? It can appear as if it emphasizes particular flavors and de-emphasizes other flavors, and yet in actuality everything of its nature is included always. So apparent partialization is not actual partialization. It has to do with the nature of infinity, but it's impossible to analyze it, so it's much simpler just to see it.
To see the apparent partialization, and then you start with the apparency, and then you look more specifically, and you can't find any strong edge, right? Is that?
Well, that's a kind of a, yeah, that's a kind of a deconstructive way to look at it. But it's more profound than that. Just a second, let me see if I can find a more succinct way to put it. What were we talking about?
About partialization or seeming partialization of I. Okay, let me.
Partialization is a fantasy because anything that appears that seems to be partialized or that you're holding to be partialized includes everything else. So it's not actually partialized, number one. And number two, what it seems to be is more than whatever it is you're taking it to be. I mean, what it is always more than whatever you're taking it to be. So partialization is like constructing a caricature of something. But it's peculiar because there can be seemingly emphasized flavors. But those flavors transcend themselves because they're actually more than what they seem to be. If you're pinning anything down, if you're interpreting anything, like you said, we were talking earlier about depression. If you think depression is depression, you're actually creating a caricature of what you think depression is, and then you're supposing the actuality is that. But depression isn't depression. Depression is much more than depression. Depression is a whole universe. Depression is a whole rainbow. And everything is.
Okay, so there seems to be a script that runs for me, like where I'll sense some sort of depressiveness, and you talked about how I'm one of those improvement guys, which I am, right? So I'll sense some sort of depressiveness or vagueness because of, I guess we could say, the Neptune. Neptune.
Well, it's a mistake to say, to think in terms of because it's not
Okay.
that simple,
But okay, so I sense some sort of flavor,
right?
right? That I interpret as problematic,
Right.
right? And then there's a sort of there's this ready response of, you know, try to improve, try to come up with the palliative or the way to allay or whatever, right? So that, like you would talk about all of that as just misinterpretation and partialization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that the conditions that you're defining that way don't exist. It's just that what they are is actually infinitely beyond the way you're defining them, the way you're holding them to be.
And to
Not just theoretically, but experientially.
and so in terms of trying to surf the seemingly unpleasant, problematic aspects, right? There's a way to surf just like the infinite aspects of those flavors.
Exactly.
Oh.
Partialization, conceptualization, oversimplification reinforces itself. So if you think something is something, then the fact that you're thinking it is that will tend to recur. You'll tend to keep going back to it's that, and you'll be cutting yourself off from noticing the way the actual experience is different than that, and is continually morphing. If you just go to actual experience, it'll just space out. Experience is just, you'll go to actual experience and you'll go, what was I thinking of? What was I thinking of? Because experience is absolutely, fundamentally, absolutely incoherent. And all the apparent coherence that seems to appear, experience itself washes that, absorbs that into its very nature, because it doesn't actually exist autonomously. Do you follow that?
Sort of. I guess my
Experience is very smeary and very multidimensional and multi-flavored and dynamic. Whatever you're being with will tend to morph into other aspects of it and tend to morph into otherness, and there'll be continue. If you go to experience itself, you will tend to be cast adrift without any particular predictable destination. It's just like, jumping out of a spaceship. You're just gone. Where are you? You're just in deep space. And that's what experience is actually like. But there's our habit of partializing and interpreting experience as being this, that, in a way that is coherent and in a way that persists over time. Both of those are fantasies, because the experience is not actually coherent and it does not actually persist over time. Or let's say it continually mutates and morphs over time, if you want. So the habit of doing that goes against what's actually here. And so if you're looking at experience in terms of that and expecting it to be like that, you'll be locked into a hypnotic loop, denying the actuality of experience, and locked into your particular cartoon caricaturized version of it. And even though obviously you are in experience and are nothing but experience, you will not be acknowledging it. You'll be in denial about its actual nature, and you'll just be asserting that it is, no, it's this way, it's this way, it's this way. But experience itself undermines that, gives a lie to it, invalidates that, because experience itself is not like that.
Putting markers down, trying to anchor oneself.
Yeah, there's no anchors.
But that process, that attempt, it's unpleasant.
Of course it is. It's unpleasant because it's impossible. It's like trying to keep things the same. Nothing stays the same. You can't hang on to something. Try and hang on to the relationship. Relationships change. They evolve. You try and lock it onto it and expect it to be a certain way and expect it to not change. You're banging your head against a wall. It's an enormous amount of effort and labor, and you will not get the result you're trying to do. So you have to throw in even more labor into denial and into spin doctoring and into blustering and brute force and all these kinds of things. Because the experience itself is, the conditions of experience are always sort of slipping away from you, morphing into something else. All of it. And so you have something like depression, you feel there's depression, or I have a tendency to be depressed, or there's something like that. If you look at what's there, eventually you'll be somewhere else. And even immediately, if you're sensitive, you'll be somewhere else. Because depression is not depression. Depression is a whole universe of inconceivability. Everything is a whole universe of inconceivability.
Therapists, they talk about confronting whatever issues and then
But again, that's supposing that there are issues and that there is a through them.
There's only sort of stories that perpetuate a certain seeming condition.
Sure.
And they must be believed.
Well, they're not true. And if you do believe them, you're not doing yourself any favors. You're just maintaining an insanity.
It's too strong to say that the only salvation for whatever the typical human condition of partiality is this becoming comfortable with the ungroundedness.
Well, ultimately, yeah. But most people don't want an ultimate solution. They're quite content with little temporary, partial, small baby step solution.
And the constant fighting.
So then most people are quite contented with shifting from one unreal, irrational orientation to a different unreal, irrational orientation that seems to be a slight improvement. But the fact that it's unreal means sooner or later that's going to become a problem too. And they're going to switch from that. because eventually the reality of their lives will not support their interpretation.
Would you say that the only real problem there is that people have a sort of knee-jerk reaction against a sense of ungroundedness, that they have an immediate interpretation of that being unpleasant, extremely unpleasant?
I don't know, maybe. I mean, that's not the only problem, but that's probably the most fundamental impediment to realization.
Well, I mean,
people have a very powerful urge to be oriented, and if their orientation is causing a problem, what they'll look for is an improved orientation. Most people will not be satisfied with just no orientation. They feel no orientation feels wrong, alien, counterintuitive, inhuman, and it is inhuman. It's transhuman, because the humanity is itself an interpretive framework.
You find it pleasant and enjoyable.
What's that?
That sense of ungroundedness.
Oh, it's exquisite.
Yeah.
That's absolutely exquisite, and people know that too, but they're scared of it, so they don't go into it. I mean, people like to get intoxicated. They like to get startled. They like to, they like to be pushed beyond the edge of their safety or their normalcy, but they don't want to live there because again of this erroneous notion that there's some urgency, there's some importance in maintaining some kind of orientation to something.
Yeah, I have to put myself together so I can work.
Yeah, all that. Exactly so. Put myself together. It's like, well, what if you didn't? What would you be if you didn't put yourself together?
Yeah. Bum with no money.
Maybe yes, maybe no.
Stoned.
Yeah. And your problem?
I'm not saying it's a problem. I didn't pull myself together. I couldn't be stoned.
I think this whole notion of ungroundedness is, I think that's where most of us live most of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what's going on, and it's only when we think about it, when we get anxious about something, that we decide then that something like that is unpleasant or fearful. It's not. It's where we live.
These interpretive frameworks are very, very partial. They're like an oil film floating on the surface of the Pacific Ocean or something. And they're not actually the opposite of groundlessness. Groundlessness is the ever-present and overwhelming condition. And so there's this, it's a sort of a, it's a fart in a hurricane to try to come up with an orientation, because the orientation is just this little paltry stick figure in the midst of this wide open actuality. There's no way it can actually contain it or successfully block it, which is why people feel so urgent about it, because it has to be continually maintained and continually have energy put into it in order to pretend that it's effective or true or useful or powerful.
Well, and it's more disturbing when you think there's this static thing. And that's
Well, it's horrible.
It's horrible.
It's horrible. I mean, that's samsara. From the classical point of view of spiritual tradition, samsara is hell. This orientation, this compulsive orientation, this neurotic orientation is hell. It's the basis of suffering. And letting go of all that is the basis of release and bliss and ecstasy and fulfillment.
Again, to me, it's not so much about letting go as noticing that it's already let go.
Yeah.
It's just kind of seeing that this is already that way. So there's nothing to do. Anything extra to do.
Well, just letting go in the sense of not reinstating it, not insisting on reinstating it.
Because you can't be a state.
No, you can't, but you can still spend a lot of time.
Fine.
Yeah, going through the motions, which is actually very typical, in an ongoing issue for most people that are approaching spirituality, because people have these wonderful transcendental experiences. And, wow, I saw that I was one with everything, and I saw that I was God, and this all happened 7 years ago. But since then, it's like I lost it. What happened? You didn't lose it. You just unconsciously went back to a mode of putting up your version of things, which effectively cuts you off from noticing and appreciating the fact that of this astounding condition that you in fact did notice then and are noticing now, that you just let yourself sit. This whole issue of interpretation versus the uninterpretable actuality is the basic spectrum, the basic polarity of spirituality. And it's all about that. A spiritual aspirant, what they're really trying to do is see through their interpretive framework and discover the fact of the actuality, which is uninterpretable. And a realized being is someone who realizes that actuality is uninterpretable, and that's what they are. It's really that simple. Those are the only, that is the issue. And so then to just try to get overly specific about this interpretation or that interpretation, it's like it's irrelevant, it doesn't matter. Any interpretation is delusion. Any interpretation is a fountain of pain. to be poetic.
That's the good news.
And you're free to make interpretations as a game, but it will not cause pain when you know that the interpretations are not true. Then it's just a game you play with yourself, which is in fact all it ever was. But if you fall into the mistake of believing your own bullshit, which seems to be more or less the commonplace human condition, then you suffer. I forgot to hit record on the audio, so that's all been censored.
Well, that's good. Did you record?
It's on the video, though.
Okay.
Sorry.
Did you hit the button finally?
Oh, yeah.
For the audio? Okay.
I'm not completely incompetent.
Just partial.
So it comes down to identifying bullshit as bullshit.
Yeah.
That's it.
And you don't even need to stop wallowing in bullshit. Just know that it is that, and then you're free from it. You won't be trapped by it. Much is made in certain yogic schools of discrimination. And this is exactly this discrimination they're talking about. You discriminate between what is actual from what is false, what is bullshit, what is not true. What is true, what is real, versus anything else.
And yet, when you come down to it, everything else is real too.
It is real. But seeing the way in which that's
There's only one
so,
thing.
and seeing the way in which that's so, eliminates the bullshit.
I love this stuff.
Cheap high.
Yes. I thought you said it was a cheap pie.
So last week I was mentioning that I was in the ER, and for the days before that I was having some sense that I was right, and my mind was going into a completely passive mode, and I think I was extremely lucid, at least internally. And then in the ER, I was felt like my psychic powers were blooming, and then Tuesday night I had what I thought was an encounter with some invisible alien god creatures that were doing an operation on me. So he said all of that was fine, right? But as soon as I started to interpret it, right, that it was delusion, right? Yeah. But you also mentioned something that you said, I forget exactly what you meant, but or what you were saying with this, but you said that, something about being in the realm of cities or entering into the realm of cities, right? Can you talk more about that, or what you meant by that?
Cities is nonlinear functionality. Cities is functionality, apparent functionality that transcends human normalcy.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, cities are happening all the time, but they're generally not acknowledged. So again, it becomes a matter of noticing. And the main thing that prevents these alien modes from being acknowledged is interpretation. One interprets them out of existence by having a heavy-handed interpretation that in effect acts like censorship. It sort of hypnotically screens one from acknowledging aspects of one's own experience.
So basically, when I said afterwards that I was going crazy, that's the interpretation that
Sure.
blacks out, or even when
But even in the going crazy, there may have been interpretation going on.
yeah, like as I was saying, I thought there were aliens or creatures or
Yeah.
something.
But that was based on some kind of experiential flavor, which was a kind of a noticing, because it was a non-ordinary, relatively experiential flavoring, I suppose, from what you ordinarily acknowledge, right?
Huh?
So the problem isn't the aliens that were operating you, the problem was interpreting that it was aliens and that they were operating on.
I had a similar experience earlier this week.
Okay.
Aliens operating on you?
Yeah.
Dude.
Give us some details.
Well, I've been praying for downloads I've been praying to get a download for a new operating system. So my mind is neurotic and obsessive and all that. I had this experience of getting kind of like a new operating system download. And I guess I just engaged with it. It's pretty weird, but
Your mind works better now?
seems to.
Well, I'll chime in on this, because I've been having a lot of clients who have like this entity of thing, and it's just so much fun to not know what they are, to just let it be whatever thing it is.
Sure.
Like aliens, I don't know, something, I don't know. It's just different. It's just,
But everything is flavors of experiential characteristics, and no experiential characteristic is analyzable. So you can't say what anything is.
right.
You know, I mean, what is this? Alien presences. You know,
Right.
and we define it out of existence and define it in the normal sense. Oh no, it's just a bunch of people sitting around. You know, but then you have something else that you don't define, and that's there experientially, and oh, it's an alien. You know, but as soon as you say it's an alien, you're stepping on it hard. You're defining it as being something that you think has some relationship to something else. Whereas in actuality, what it is undefinable. But everything is absolutely undefinable. I mean, that's the simple fact, and that's the real. That's actually the line of least resistance too. I mean, what could be easier than to just, I don't have a clue what anything is. Bang. You know, and it's true. It's honest. It's like because if you have to churn up all these claims of having a handle on things, you know, it's all bullshit. It's all it's all hot air.
So those who, you were talking last week, those who are interested in magic are going to court these non-ordinary experiences, but then they're going to try to get something, right?
Maybe.
Or they're partialized.
Maybe I was talking about what typically seems to happen.
Okay, so in that particular situation, they try to get
But
you.
it's very similar, you know. So people that are drawn to occultism generally try to get some kind of status. People that are drawn to, you know, some kind of mainstream spirituality like Buddhism generally try to fit into that and you know, maybe lose some status or whatever. I don't know what. But in all these cases, it's a game structure that's interpreted on the basis of, by doing certain actions, I'm going to achieve certain results. And all of that is imaginary. This is a game. It's a game. It's that can be played in one's imagination and then acted out as if that was what you were actually acting out. But in actuality, nothing like that is ever being acted out. Nothing is being acted out. But it's an inclusive nothing. It's not a negating nothing. It's not taking all this and saying, no, it's nothing, you know, erase it. It's like, yeah, all this, but nothing is being acted out. All this, but it's not anything. It's not being negated, it's just, it's not anything that can be named or defined or pinned down or structuralized or schematicized. So you have more freedom.
When I had that experience, I think I kind of knew or know now, I don't really hang out in communities that talks about this type of thing, unless this is going to become that. Like I don't have like pictures or books about this type of thing. So it's, since there's not like a lot of purchase in my reality, if I just, it may not come to mind a lot and I may forget about it. So it's sort of a transitory feature of my reality, you know, but I may still reap benefits from it. I may just kind of take them and run with them.
Yeah, I mean, try anything. You know, my recommendation is don't think that it is what you think it is you're doing. But on the other hand, do anything whatsoever as a vehicle of exploration or a vehicle of experimentation. You know, the only thing you can do wrong is to crystallize it down, to pretend to crystallize it down and to where you, oh, this is this and that's that. Now I know what it is and this is that. All these names and descriptions are just very vague, poetic metaphors that are totally imprecise and inaccurate and don't actually capture anything. But all this kind of experimentation is wonderful because, you know, the great tendency of the human psyche or the human energy system is this inertia of locking onto, you know, interpretive frameworks, locking onto holding things to be a certain way. And this operates powerfully just in the human consciousness or whatever. And so anything that pushes the boundaries of that is potentially useful. The partiality and the artificiality and the untrueness in its own terms of this defining and orienting mode that consciousness keeps having an instinct to spit out.
There's a sense of connected with that tendency to lock in on interpretations is like some an emotional desire to belong to a group or something like that, or right, sort of there's a sense of consensual reality. Right?
True. But all of that is is the same thing. It's all just the same mechanism of orienting, of creating orientations which are fundamentally partializations and hence inaccuracy or untrue about what is actually here and the way it actually is. So all these orientations are figments, they're fiction. Because they exclude, they omit a vast quantity and quality of what this actually is.
It's like all the forms can be just as they are, but there's a kind of, I sense it like there's this inherent dynamism in everything. So it's sort of like when you feel that, it's like there's a kind of, like you can kind of surf it, kind of play with all the forms that are, because they have this quality of constantly morphing and changing.
Yeah, the dynamism and also an infinite dimensionality. So forms are what they are, but if you really see what's there, you're looking at an infinite, literally infinite fractal dimensionality that has absolutely no limit. In every explicit simple form, you're looking at infinity. Concretely, not just philosophically or theoretically.
So it's this, and this.
This forever.
It's not an alien, it's not.
No, yeah, it's as many thises as you can come up with, and there's still more. This is forever.
Yeah, it's just we're interpreting.
Yeah.
It's more interpreting. It's just adding on interpretations which cancel each other out.
No, nothing gets canceled. And interpretations are all fine. They're just not. None of them are final or true.
But for you, you don't find yourself interpreting.
I interpret constantly, but I know that interpretation doesn't create limitation.
Yeah. Okay.
So I can interpret this as being a cup, and I can interpret it as being here to hold my tea, but I know that it's actually a complete infinity of inconceivability, concretely. And interpreting it as being a cup, which is a partialization of the universe that this actually is, does not in any way block or inhibit or change that universe. So interpretations aren't the opposite of infinity. Interpretations exist within infinity, but in their own terms tend to be the opposite, because an interpretation claims, oh no, this is only a cup. This is a cup and no more. It's just a mediocre, piece of shit cup. Whereas in actuality, sure, it's a cup, but it's literally limitless universes. It's a beautiful cup. It's another interpretation. Both wrong.
Is there more in the apparition of a person that you come across than there is?
No. Everything is infinite. There's no such thing as more or less.
But you talked before about coming into contact with a person as like galaxies colliding, right? It's the same thing. You come in contact with a cup.
Sure.
You feel the same impact.
Sure.
There's no way of measuring
It's
that.
different flavors.
Because everything is a dance with everything else. So when I'm with you, I dance with you, but I'm dancing with the universe. And I'm with this cup, I'm dancing with the cup, and I'm dancing with the universe. poetically speaking.
Dancing in the sense of interpretive orientations?
No, not necessarily, although those elements may be present. Dancing in the sense of an absolute hyper-intelligent, responsive interaction.
Otherwise known as Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah. Dancing with the corks, dancing with the infinite dimensions.
We just experience.
Yeah,
And what that is an interpretation of what that is.
yeah.
Interpretations are kind of like a carnival ride, you know? You go on them, they're not real, just a ride.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because like when I always have these flashbacks of when I was a kid and went to Disneyland, like, and it's like a carnival ride where you didn't knew what nothing was. So you weren't labeling anything or interpreting anything. You were just seeing this vast, like, psychedelic trip all the time, and it's like that all the time if you allow it. Yeah, instead of like saying, oh, no, that's just it's not real. It's not a real, like, the ride was, it's a small world after all. And there's like all these villages and all these little dolls. And it's like, I thought they were real because I didn't know if they were real or not. But it's like now I interpret something as being real or not. And it's totally a nightmare.
Well, it's artificial, it's imaginary.
Yeah.
The closest you can get to qualifying real is all experience is real experience. And that's the closest you can get to qualifying. And everything within experience is real experience because experience doesn't have a within or a without. It just appears.
So where it gets tricky is some interpretations seem more accurate than others.
Right, but that's not true.
And yet they function that way as if they work.
No, what works is actuality. Interpretations don't work at all.
Well, recognition of what is being experienced.
I don't follow.
Well, say everything is just an interpretation. But some interpretations, like we just said, this seem more accurate than others. Like I can interpret this as because everything is fluid, as this being a floor of water. And, okay, that's an interpretation. We can make distinctions that have a precision to them that seem closer to what the experience actually is.
Perhaps, but closer and less closer, both complete misses.
They are on an absolute level, but on a relative level where we live in a world with other beings, we are experiencing others, then we have to make decisions about things.
How do you make decisions? What makes decisions?
Unknown. It's just unknown.
So how, in what way is making decisions relative then, if it's unknown? The mind may pretend that
Well,
these decisions are rational and are based on accurate information and clear interpretation and so on and so forth, but in actuality, decisions are all completely irrational and spontaneous. If you look closely and see. I mean, why do you do what you do? Why does anyone do what they do? All of the interpretation of all that at the end of the day is just, rationalization and spin doctoring and justification, because it doesn't capture the actual flow of events. It may approximate it. I mean, sure, interpretations can be approximations. Interpretations are approximations. And some approximations are better than others, but they're all wrong. They're all inaccurate. And in that sense, they're all, a miss, not a hit. For the purposes of liberation, it's essential to discover what actuality is. And once you know what actuality is, then you can see that actuality is uninterpretable. And then you can see that all of these apparent interpretations that humans use as a mode of communication and so on exist in a context as harmonics of this uninterpretable actuality. And then you'll see that there's no dichotomy between the two. Even though in terms of the interpretations, there seems to be a dichotomy. But that itself is just an interpretation. Like words and language pretend, in their own terms, pretend to be rational and pretend to be descriptive. But language is not rational and language is not descriptive. Language is an inconceivable, magical emanation that is more of the dance of infinity with itself. And it does not exist in the terms in which language itself defines itself as doing.
Why is there no dichotomy between the unspeakable actuality and the harmonics?
Because the harmonics are unspeakable actuality. So I'm saying there's no dichotomy between the waves and the ocean.
But did you say the harmonics are the differentiated perceptions?
You could say that. You could look at it in those terms. But again, even the differentiated perceptions aren't actually differentiated, because the harmonics aren't actually harmonics. They include the whole spectrum of energy. They don't exist independently or autonomously as separate phenomena. The waves don't exist as separate phenomena from the energy of the ocean. The waves are the energy of the ocean. So when you look at a wave, the whole ocean comes with. So if you look at, so now we're talking, seemingly we're speaking semi-clearly, semi-rational words, right? Semi-logically, And so theoretically, from the point of view of words and intellect and analysis, well, that sort of exists autonomously as a notion being expressed in words or explored in words or whatever. That's from the point of view of words and from the point of view of logic. But where did logic come from? Where did words come from? Before humans knew how to speak words, how did the words come out? They just arose as harmonics, the same way waves rise out of the ocean, same way bird songs rise out of, matter. And all of this elaboration of analysis and logic and thought also rises out of the fundamental energy phenomena, the base, the ground of existence, which is what all this is, and it's analogous to the ocean. And so the ocean shows up as all sorts of waves in infinite detail, but none of the detail actually departs from being anything other than the ocean. And the waves don't exist in their own terms. They don't exist in a wave-like way with wave-like logic and wave-like analysis. They're just a damn ocean. When you go to the beach, you're not seeing waves, you're seeing the ocean. And likewise, here we're having a conversation, but all we're seeing is irrational, inconceivable, miraculous energy apparition, which is all that there ever is.
Like if we go back to how you said, when you see a wave, the entire ocean comes with it.
Of course.
So I'm just seeing if I can get a sense of that now, like looking at anything in the room that the whole universe is coming with.
Sure.
Looking at this little table stand here. And spatially, there's no. It's all spatially contiguous, so I can't kind of get that without everything else.
Yeah, you can't take this table and lift it out of the universe and have the universe over here and the table over here.
Right.
The universe comes with the table. The only place you can find the table is in the universe, and the universe never goes away. You can't ever just be with the table and make the universe go. It comes with it. It's stuck to it.
It seems discrete though.
Well, but the seeming is a process of mental analysis. Indiscreet about it. It is a gradation in an infinite continuum. So if I look at the continuum of my visual spectrum right now, there's infinities of different colors and apparent shapes and groupings and so on and so forth. And I can say that, I can arbitrarily pick aspects of those and say they're discrete, but in actuality, it's continuum. You can look at like with the painting on the wall, and you can say, well, that blotch of yellow is discontinuous from the blotch of white that it's appearing on. But in actuality, all that's there is paint on the goddamn paper or whatever, and the paint is continuous. And it appears infinitely differentiated, but all the differentiation appears in the continuum. And you can't lift the differentiation away from the continuum and separate them. Always comes with it. So the differentiation is an aspect of the continuum.
So, well, another issue my mind doesn't wrap around so well, it doesn't accept, is if I step out the doors, more universe will appear, if I go up the street. So even if all of that is available, because if I go out there, it'll be there. From where I'm sitting now, it's not directly, I think I have to move through time and space to get there, it would seem, to kind of access that information.
Right. So what about that?
Well, I guess some part of me desires, or as if it should be instantly, like the whole universe comes with, why can't I just be there now? Why can't I apprehend all time and space at once. What I can move through.
You are, well, you have a notion that there's an all time and space other than the time and space you're apprehending. This is all time and space. It's like when you're dreaming at night, it's not, there's nothing outside the dream you're dreaming. Suppose you're dreaming that you're inside that room.
Right.
And in the dream, you can think about what's outside the room.
Right.
But the outside the room that's there is only there in the dream because you're thinking about it in the dream. You put it there by defining it into existence in the dream. It wasn't there. And when you experience the dream, you're experiencing the entirety of all space and time. Because there is no space and time except what's in the dream. So space and time is not something that exists objectively. Space and time is what you are. It's the continuum of your experiential field. And you always experience all of it. Although it has this very slippery and peculiar tendency to zoom in and out on itself and generate focuses where it focuses here and focuses there, and sometimes your thought is emphasized, or sometimes you're daydreaming, or sometimes you're intent on a sensory experience more predominantly, and so on and so forth. But all of that is still always within the continuum, and the continuum always comes with. And the continuum is the continuum of your experiential field, and you can't find anything whatsoever outside your experiential field. So the notion that there is an objective world that exists outside your experiential field is just a notion that exists within your experiential field.
I guess it elicits some view or some operating system here that thinks that there's more. You know, outside, since it looks different and is mapped out as a different terrain in my memory, whatever.
Yeah.
So there's more there, and so this couldn't be all.
There's infinite differences, but they're only there when they're there. Like what you dreamed about last night, that's different. That's a different terrain, but it's only there when you're dreaming of it. It's not like it's sitting there somewhere waiting for you to go to it. In fact, you're never going to go to it again. You know, you might dream a similar dream, but it will be completely different. In fact, the outside that you go to, if you put your head out that door now and looked around, everything that you saw would be different than anything you've ever seen before in your life. Because you would be seeing different colors from different angles, different perspectives. The experience would be different. And so the notion that there's a yard out there which is just fixed and is always more or less the same, that you experience over and over again, is a fantasy. Because the actuality of experience is, you know, it's always complete uniqueness and newness. Right now, you've never experienced anything you experienced right now before, precisely. You know, again, the more you generalize, the more it can seem to be the same. You can say, well, I've been in this room lots of times, and I'm usually sitting here, and it usually looks more or less like this. But as soon as you say more or less, you're generalizing, and experience is not made of generalities. Experience is made of specifics. You aren't experiencing generalities now, you're experiencing just what you're damn experiencing. And that's specific. You're seeing exactly the colors you're seeing, exactly the light you're seeing, hearing exactly the sounds you're hearing, and you've never heard them before, you've never seen them before. And they're already gone. It's already something else now in this instant, and that's already gone, and so on and so forth.
It seems somewhere tied in here is like we're looking for more. Yeah, there's some primordial, there's just some deeply patterned sense of life.
Yeah.
Looking for more experience. Like
Sure.
There's not enough.
Yeah, but this again exists in your imagination, in your mentality, you might say, as a habitual pattern, as a habitual orientation. You're used to thinking that it's actually like that, and that has power because of your habit. And so it seems to be viable. It seems to be something you go to. So the only way to get beyond that is to see the way in which that's not true by doing the kind of explorations or kind of experimentation like we're talking about here. where you just do a reality check of, well, what's really here? My experience. Is there anything else here? Could there be anything here but my experience? It's like, how could that happen? What would that, I can imagine it, but then all of a sudden, that's something that I'm imagining in my experience right here, right now. So you can't ever break that circle. You can't ever get outside the experiential continuum. And the experiential continuum is all that can be found to exist. And so the idea that there's more than that is just an idea that occurs within the experiential continuum. And it exists because it's appearing in the experiential continuum. Just like a dream you're dreaming exists because it's appearing in the experiential continuum, or this conversation in this room exists only because it's appearing within your experiential continuum. Some room you've never been in, you're never going to go in, and some conversation you're never going to have. How real is it? It's except as an idea that you might, that might be suggested in terms of this conversation or something. The whole notion that there's objectivity is a fantasy. Objectivity is a theory. It's a hypothesis, and it's a viable hypothesis, but it cannot be found because it's like the real question in all this is, does the refrigerator light stay on when you close the door? It's meaningless. It's gibberish because you can't experience it. So, what refrigerator light? And now what refrigerator? Where's your refrigerator? It's nowhere.
And so preferences, or the experience of fulfillment of preferences, is some arbitrary cognition of, or some arbitrary flavor of enjoyment that's
Sure.
arbitrary, but just is what it is.
Yeah, sure. And it's a matter of inclination. You have an inclination to have a preference for a certain thing or quality, and then you have an inclination to try and seek out that quality to whatever extent you can, and you have an inclination to feel satisfied if you do, or pleasure if you do, and you have an inclination to feel frustration if you don't. And all of that is just a little energy vortex that appears in this spontaneously. Again, it's not, everything appears spontaneously. Nothing is being done. Everything just. And thought is the same way. Thought and all these ideas is just more spontaneously appearing energy vortices. You're looking, trying to pin down what it is. You don't find anything. You just find, the infinite harmonic seeming elaborations of this continuum that never depart from this continuum, and are always nothing other than this continuum itself. And you can look for yourself and see if that's true. You can just look and see if you can, try and refute it. It's like, okay, well, check it out. It's like, well, let me see, that's an interesting notion. Let me look for myself and see what's what. Oh, look at that. It's break time. We'll be back in about 10 minutes.
How long do we usually go to? Till 9? Or
9.
9?
Put some other people on the spot for a change.
Keep going.
And what did you bring to?
I've got some cheese and some Trader Joe's big noodles. But the Trader Joe's.
Glutinous.
Yeah, they got gluten. It's all that. Gluten-free.
What's that?
Gluten-free.
Yeah. But Aaron, what do you work as? You're on the side therapist or what?
Yeah.
You do some energy healing? Or?
Yeah, I do a mix of a bunch of stuff.
Medicine?
Well, I don't do medicine. Well, I mean, that's all. Consider how you define medicine.
Like psychedelic?
Oh, no. I mean, wow, that's interesting. No, I'm not interpreting.
Are you like Marsha? Did you?
I'm a Martian for sure.
Marsha.
Oh, who's Marsha?
Marsha comes here.
Oh,
sometimes.
right. I don't know what she does. I've never talked to her about what she does.
I think mostly cranial signal, and she gets images from people and tells them about them.
Yeah, I get lots of images. I get a whole movie. Yeah, a whole. I can find all these really cool stuff. That's fun. Yeah, and I work with the bone, the liquid, and the tissue. So it's like in a lot of different levels.
Oh, okay.
I try to help people when they get someone, but getting rid of the water is hard enough.
How much water should they drink?
Half your weight in ounces. Always.
How many ounces in a gallon?
64.
32.
32 and a half. No,
32.
32 gallon.
Well,
Oh,
is that like 2 gallons a day?
To like 150. So yeah.
But I hear from like this traditional Chinese doctor and Ayurvedic doctor, they say, oh no, don't do that. Just drink whenever you're thirsty.
With that. But then it's like, are you I mean, that takes an incredible amount of inner intelligence to like know when you're thirsty or not.
Oh no, she was saying like about a liter a day is fine. That's way too little for you.
I mean, there's a litmus test that almost every nutritionist does, and we pull this tissue right here. And if it goes right down, you've had enough hydration. If it stays, means you're not getting enough water. And the amount of time that it takes, like, so I'm at a low. Mine takes a little bit.
Oh.
But, I mean, yeah. I mean, we're mostly water. And I guess if you absorb water, there's so many factors. It's like what is your system? Is your system freely flowing and open, or is it antagonized? I mean, there's just so many factors.
Yeah.
But, and like, are you drinking spring water versus like chemically laden municipal water?
He drinks the chemically laden stuff. He's got prescription strength fluoride for his teeth.
There you go. I mean, it just depends on how seriously you take your body. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I had to go to the ER because I was super dehydrated and I saw thyroid medication. Because the people who I also retreat for
Oh.
That should be interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, Peter
Mhm.
Lily texted me about the apartment. You are in the closest, I think you've been there before. It's the closest apartment
Oh, right.
and Lonnie was,
I'm not worried about it. I think Shirley's gonna be up better by then. I mean, it's already, happened 3 days ago and it's already been a lot better.
yeah, I mean, you can also just drive her to the parking lot.
Yeah, it's not, yeah, totally, it's not.
But anyway,
Yeah, thanks.
at least she doesn't have to worry about that.
Yeah. It's not, I mean, there's not many long distances there anyway.
Right.
I used to favor,
That's great.
I used to favor glitter myself. Different times, I guess.
My girlfriend.
Yeah.
Kids at daycare like it.
Nice.
I did not, I was trained with you, but he called it holographic memory remains. So you can go in and you can find the interference pattern on cranial control. It's so much fun to play with. It's really great. That's absolutely not on my travel, you want to have. I would go with that, I would go with that work. I mean. Well, it depends, okay, so this is too complex. The picture's too
Here. I
Wait,
had the audio of that tarot class that you gave, but I edited it out. You say Yodhe Vavhe, and then I looped it for an hour. I've been listening to it as I go to sleep sometimes.
Fun.
It's nice.
Where you go, how you.
The Kabbalah's a lot of fun.
Getting in the car, yeah.
I actually
I mean, the more open you are,
stopped
and then-
looking into it because I thought it was distracting me too much.
Yeah, it's a black hole. It'll suck you right in.
Well,
I thought it was making me
Oh,
smarter.
We had decided time shapes it.
It's good for mental.
It is, it's, you know, tarot is especially like that. I mean, learning tarot is like taking going to grad school or something. I mean, you really have to work your mind and your intuition and everything.
Not much.
What I try to do is like get you
Next
to
week,
next.
you can Josh retreat.
I mean, I do, but I don't.
Well,
I mean,
my
I'm
ass,
really
I
good
don't know if
finding
you
it.
and the next
You're
guy,
the one
we have
not-
to wait till you
As
get
far
back.
as like how long ago last year, the one that I try to get you to.
Let's see, if I do, I can actually watch for that. I just schedule it.
Like your infinite field, like in my head, it's like, really good field from there. Your adjustments will last forever. If you can stay there, you can stay in the
Nice.
Where'd you get those?
Yeah, I know.
What you did? Use a marker on them?
Yeah.
Aliens.
Wow. He's in Israel and then a month in Scotland. We're doing Thomas People's healing global trauma. Oh.
He's gonna be, he's gonna be Effortless.
Oh, right, yeah, no, he's living in Israel now. It's very incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's like 20 people from Germany. Oh. It's all the place to have healing global trauma. So that's unusual.
Okay, I guess we have to start now,
We have to, right?
because, you know,
It says
I know
so
how
in the,
you are with that.
says so in the bylaws. No, I'm completely arbitrary.
You are,
Yeah. I'm just a really rigid guy.
Do you know who else is living?
Oh, yeah, there's some guy, he's like, oh, really wants it.
The one that's in the
Yeah, he's really good. The best is the coordination configuration stuff. And he's in coordinator, David Kitts. He did that. If you really want to.
Yeah, that's
How much do you charge?
too bad you need them.
I mean, I go to a lot of those places.
Those figures are really good. Most tempting thing I've been tempted to buy in.
Well,
But I know I don't want to. It's fine, but this is really funny when you realize.
of all things,
Yeah, right, yeah.
expected, that was like the most,
Yeah, it's like this, I don't know, I used to love figures. But not even from childhood, it was more from like college that I was like figures.
It's like the just as obvious cookies, but I was good.
There's something I like about squishy thing and pastry.
What was the first name?
David. You can go to his website, it's really cool. David Kitts.
who's that?
Oh, this guy in Corte Madera that does, it's called core individuation. Which it goes about structural integration, like just talking about network chiropractors, but what he does, like, does this whole adjustment based on your body's own intelligence. It's really effective.
Wow.
We'll be back, so I will fire things up again.
So Peter, Sunday was at this thing, and this teacher, he was leading us through a sort of inquiry into the spiritual anatomy of the heart, right? Did you ever think along those lines, or like, it's too much partialization, too much interpretation.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean, what that would mean.
Well, so it was just like, so you do this Vayam process, and the person just asks you, what's the true nature of your heart, right? And then you just try to tune in, and then I was seeing it sort of like a fountain that was, there was sort of exuberance, quality, but I don't know. My partner was finding a grounding that I wasn't necessarily finding, right? Like it's sort of shining down at the same time. It was shining up, right? So that sort of thing, right?
But you can do that sort of thing with anything. I mean, I don't, the whole notion of the heart, I don't know what, I just don't really get that. And, if anything you look at opens into infinite dimensionality. Again, it is exactly the way it is, but it's that way unlimitedly, and which goes into other ways exclusively. So you can do that with your heart, you can do that with the tip of your nose, you can do that with, something on a piece of rock on the ground, you can do that with anything, and you find the same thing. And if you want to, look at subtle anatomy, that's fine. But again, it's arbitrary, because subtle anatomy is infinite, it doesn't have structure. Or it has infinite inherent structure.
What do you mean by infinite inherent structure?
I mean, any way you look, you're looking at subtle anatomy.
And then what he was also trying to do, which you would object to, I assume, is like, so he was a therapist, and he was saying, and everyone he has talked to has the same, no matter how terribly traumatized they are, it's the same true nature of the heart, whatever. So he was trying to underscore commonalities when he talked about his experience. And that was available to everyone, sort of thing. So that sort of stuff you would object to, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's nothing but the true nature, but I just don't get the of the heart stuff. What makes the heart special or particular, or what does of the heart even mean? The heart's a muscle that pumps blood.
But a lot of traditions, they talk about this is like a central chakra.
Every chakra is central. There's no center. It's really a mistake to centralize things.
We were talking, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago before I went to Peru. We were talking about, like, I don't know, I had this experience of everything being energy and light, right?
Yes.
You said, okay, well, that's pretty good at your level to be able to reduce things down to, right?
Sure.
So it would seem like a natural sort of extension exercise from that would be to look at sort of these energetic centers as subtle anatomy, and do like noticing around that.
Yes, but there's nothing but energetic centers. If you're imagining some fixed subtle anatomy which is a certain way, like you take out your handy dandy chakra map off your poster on the wall, and you suppose, well, this is what it's like. It's hogwash. It's not true. The subtle anatomy is radiance, which is infinite and all-inclusive. It doesn't have centers. It doesn't have a center. It has infinite centers. Anywhere you look, you can find the center of radiance. And there's no separation between your subtle body and the entirety of reality. The entirety of reality is your subtle body.
So I would guess that being the case, that those yogis who fixate on spiritual anatomy, and they, through the sort of subtle interpretation that they're doing, they push themselves in, or they create sort of non-standard experiences, which they then deem to be special.
And that might happen, but you can look anywhere. You can look at the heart and find totality of reality. But don't think that the heart is special. It's the totality of reality which is special. It's radiance which is special, not the heart. You look anywhere and you find radiance, and it's not what you're looking at that's special, it's the radiance that's special. Or you could say everything is equally special. The radiance cannot be structuralized. It presents as obviously an infinite degree of apparent structurality, but all that structure is harmonics of its nature, which is transcendental structure, which cannot be collapsed into a finite structure. And that's the true sublimity. And every and any center is a different view of the center. Wherever you look, you're looking at the center. But it has obviously infinite different apparent perspectives. So to start with some kind of credulous supposition that there's some structurality which actually applies is playing games of partiality. It's imaginary. It's a game, and worst case is you're liable to end up in just hypnotizing yourself with a lot of self-fulfilling fantasies. Best case, you see through what's actually there to the radiance, and which is absolutely doable. You know, you can look at the chakras and find the radiance, because you look anywhere to find the radiance, because that's all you can find.
I think there are worse cases.
Yeah, but they're all equivalent. You know, you don't look, and you can look in the heart to find God, but God's everywhere. So you can look at dog shit on the sidewalk to find God. And God isn't any more in the heart than it is in the dog shit. Where God is in presence, and anything that appears is present. That's the absolute, is presence. And presence by its very nature is radiant, i.e. presents with an infinite fractal holographic harmonic nature of all of this apparent information. But none of the information that collapses into coherence and stands on its own autonomously, all of it ends up being nothing other than the radiant presence itself. It's like sandcastles. It's all just sand. And you build a sandcastle and you say, oh, look, I made the sandcastle. But the sandcastle is just sand. And it's going to fall apart. It was sand before it was a sandcastle. It's sand while it's a sandcastle. And after the tide comes in, it's going to be sand again. So sandcastle is not special. The sand is what's special. And likewise, all that here is radiant presence. And you can look at, oh, but there's all these people, and there's this room, and there's this city, and there's the country, and there's the planet, and there's the solar system, and there's the subtle energy systems, and there's the this, and there's the that. But all of that is just sandcastles. And the only thing that's really here with the sandcastles is the sand. Or to quote the the great Saint Jimi Hendrix, castles made of sand melt into the sea eventually.
At his best.
Dude. So the point of all this is to look at the common denominator and don't think that where you started looking to look through it to find the common denominator has any importance. Only the radiance is sacred. And all the forms are only sacred because they happen to be radiance. The heart isn't special. You know, Om isn't special. Hindu gods and goddesses aren't special. You know, Jesus and the Pope aren't special. Dog shit isn't special. They're all just, you know, perspectives of radiant presence. And radiant presence is special.
All these, to use my favorite physical analogy, all these questions about what is this, is like asking, what's on the other side of the Mobius strip, you know?
Right. Yeah.
When this is the other side. This is always the other side at the same time, and yet there's always that beautiful question, because it seems to have the other side. That's the fun of it, you know, that's the delicious fun of it.
You use the phrase, when you see what this is.
Mhm.
When someone sees what this is, would you say that they know that they've seen what this is? Or is this something that is always evolving? Or is it something in particular that you're referring to?
Everyone's always seeing what this is. When I use that phrase, I'm referring more specifically to recognizing what this is. So, which of course is recognizing what this is, and specifically recognizing that it is everything, and that it has no partiality, and that it is oneself, it is the universe, it is the totality of reality, inclusive. So it's the, it's the keystone of the arch. It's the common denominator of what everything is. Everyone's always seeing it because there's nothing else to see. But it seems seemingly rarely recognized or appreciated as what it actually is, largely because the way it presents is so very strange and so infinitely differentiated, and people seem to be more drawn to the differences and less drawn to the sameness. Which is a mistake, because the differences are differences of sameness. The differences wouldn't exist without the sameness.
There are no differences.
No, there's not. There's just sameness. Because the differences are just the nature of the sameness. But you put it ass backwards when you focus on the differences and don't see the common denominator, and then you have, all of these disparate things that don't fit together and don't make any sense, and what are we going to do with it, And you end up, people end up killing each other and forming religions and, terrorists and politics and money and all this other insanity. What this is, it's all very clear and simple. And you're still free to kill other people if you want. But the motivation might have receded somewhat. When you can only focus on all the differences, then you're faced with all of these problems and no solutions. And it's very stressful. The implication of that is very stressful and frustrating, because there's an urge to try to pull something together, try to make sense of things, try to find some answers, try to find some solutions. And they do not exist in the realm of differentiation. Because the differentiation is not coherent. The differentiation is not like pieces of a puzzle that can just somehow be fit together. And they don't fit. They're not, because they're not anything. And when you see the sameness, you see that the differences aren't, they don't have autonomous existence. They aren't actually pieces of anything. They aren't anything at all. They're like will-o'-the-wisps. Wills of the wisp. Will-o'-the-wisps. Wills of the wisps.
It seems experienced more as a concept, to see a whole, as opposed to experience how it's appearing.
Well, the whole and how it's appearing are one and the same. And it may seem like a concept mainly because people think differences are actual and the sameness is not, but in actuality it's the other way around. But the sameness is not recognized as a thing. The thing that the sameness is experience itself. Experience is thought to be an abstraction, whereas in fact experience is the only concrete thing. And all the differences are abstractions of experience. But experience is not recognized as a thing. That all these differences are thought to exist autonomously. But they don't exist outside of experience. They are artifacts of experience. They only make sense in terms of experience. And so the world doesn't make any sense because all the differences are acknowledged, but the experience, which is what they actually are, is not recognized. It's just thought as some abstraction of, well, yeah, sure, there's experience, I'm experiencing, but I'm experiencing all this. But there is no all this, there's just experience. And the all this comes about and comes and consists of experience itself.
And you were never not experiencing.
Of course not. How could it
But
be?
the recognition is a thought.
No, recognition is seeing that is freedom from thought.
Seeing.
Yeah,
Knowing.
it's a knowing that thought does not apply. Recognition is different than the thought of recognition. And the thought of recognition does not apply to recognition. But because no thought applies to anything, because what is actually here cannot be captured or accurately indicated by concepts. So recognition is not something new or something gained. Recognition is the absence of non-recognition. Non-recognition is the value added. Recognition is the default. But non-recognition is actively imposed by these interpretive frameworks. And so when one's busy doing that, then that blocks recognition, not because recognition is actually blocked, but because one's distracted by all this non-recognition, which is being very actively put forth and insisted upon and oriented towards.
Happening on that false apart.
Yeah, because it's not anything.
So that's, you don't have to, you just kind of hang out with it and it just doesn't, I mean, if you keep trying to patch it back together, I suppose, you end up with some sort of frustrating conglomeration. But
Right, and that's more or less the ongoing common condition. Is the insistence on keep trying to reinstate a functional interpretive framework in the face of the ongoing and never-ending frustration the fact that it's impossible to do so.
But
And
just,
then we think, why can't I get my life together? Why doesn't my life make sense? Why can't I figure out what's going on? It's like, because none of that applies. There is no life. There is no together. There is no going on. And so you stop asking those questions, and then the fact that there's no answers ceases to be an issue. And then that's where recognition consists of. Realization is very easy because it's the line of least resistance. It's the default. It's what's already the case, inalienably. What's hard is all of this non-realization, which has to be instated at great effort and very actively, instated and reinstated and insisted upon. It's enormous effort and a strain. That's why people are so exhausted with their lives at the end of the day and all, because it's so much work trying to be somebody and trying to have a world and trying to pretend it all makes sense. But you let go of that, all of a sudden everything's very easy because it's all taken care of. Zero effort. There's zero effort required to have this be this. There's a lot of effort to try and say what that is. And it's all bullshit. So there's even more effort because you're faking it, and you're bullshitting and bragging, spin doctoring. It's like the torment that these Republican politicians must be in at the effort of having to continually immerse themselves in this bullshit. I mean, Jesus, a lot of work. Just for money.
And fear, right?
Hmm?
There's a lot of fear at the bottom of it. Right?
No, it's
Fear of
money.
desperation.
In the case of the politicians, just money.
Power.
Well, they think money is power. But the joke will be on them on their deathbed, because you can't take it with you.
Well, they feel they can pass it on to their children.
Yeah, but it's a fantasy. When they're dead, where's their children? When you die, the world disappears. It's just like waking up from the dream you had last night. Where is it now? The children you had in your dream, where are they? It's just a total irrelevancy.
the urge to understand and to make sense and to deal with the unknown of what this is seems so natural. It's like a given with the presence itself.
It is natural. It's very natural. But it's an immature urge. I mean, the radiance itself is what generates that, of course. The radiance generates everything. The radiance is intensely curious about itself. The radiance is exploring itself, you might say. And human analysis and human attempt at understanding is an echo of that, is an aspect of that vector. But it's an immature aspect because it cannot succeed. And so when the radiance becomes more mature, when it arrives at a more subtle appreciation of itself, it sees the uselessness of that kind of an immature medium of exploration and goes to more effective, more mature kinds of exploration with a direct irrational experience, because the rational modes are ultimately doomed to failure because of their partialization. And when the radiance is immature, when it approaches itself naively, it's viable to suppose, gee, maybe I can figure this all out. Wouldn't that be nice? And so it figures and tries to figure, and we know what that's like. But then sooner or later, it rises up and says, well, gee, I've been doing all this figuring, it's all failing. And it begins to look at why is that, and so it begins to look more precisely at what it's trying to figure out, and it sees, oh, what's trying to be figured out actually is not amenable to analysis. So any kind of logical analysis cannot succeed. And so then when it reaches that point of sensitivity, that point of subtlety and maturity, then it relinquishes those outmoded, immature modes that are doomed to failure, and then begins to employ more intimate, accurate modes, which will generate more in the way of actual results.
Into the immediacy of experience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, analysis is a bold experiment. It's a noble hypothesis. Gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we could figure all this stuff out? So let's really, let's do our best to really figure this out and think clearly and sharply and precisely and all of that. But eventually you realize that no matter how sharply and precisely you think, it's still doomed to failure. Not through any lack of intention or even lack of skill of thought, but just due to the nature of what is attempted to be analyzed. It is not amenable to analysis because it's not linear, it's infinite, it's not something that can be structuralized or analyzed. Because its very nature is paradoxical and irrational. It's one and it's many. It's light and it's dark. It's here and it's everywhere. And so you begin to look at the nature, the aspects of what this is, and it's intrinsically paradoxical. And so all this kind of logical analysis is doomed to failure. But that kind of an object.
But Peter, isn't it paradoxical from the point of view of trying to analyze it? And from when that's seen through, in a sense, you really can't say it's paradoxical anymore. It's more like it's, well, I don't know what to say, but that sense of it being a paradox or that something that doesn't fit, it completely fits.
Right. Well, it's paradoxical because when you look at properties, when you partialize properties that it has, they're all contradictory.
Yeah.
But it itself doesn't actually partialize anything. So so what you say is true. It has no problem with being one and many, and with being everything and nothing, and with being big and small, all at once. It has absolutely no problem with that because,
That's what it does.
yeah, because it is that, and so obviously there is no problem. But if you're trying to make sense of it, you're going to be banging your head against the wall in the face of this absolute inconsistencies.
I find that process that you're describing of searching for conclusion or meaning or definition, I find that still seems to continue, but with a difference. It seems to, like I was saying before, it seems to naturally fall apart, and I'm not any longer worried that it falls apart, that it doesn't work in that way.
Sure.
And that falling apart itself is it's kind of like a cascade of, I don't know, light or rainbow or something.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's the natural human mode to be curious, to question, and all those sorts of things, and that in itself is not a problem. But expecting that to, relying upon that as the mode that you have to use in order to live or succeed or function, is unrealistic and not true. So the fact of that kind of activity seeming to occur has no importance whatsoever in the context that it actually exists in, which is because that itself is just more harmonics of this, more more of the radiance, so to speak. There's no opposition. Reality does not have anything that's opposite anything else, which is very irrational. So, logical thought is not the opposite of reality. Analysis, logical analysis is not the opposite of reality. Motivated individual strategic functioning is not the opposite of reality. It transcends all of that while including it, because reality is more than that. It has other modes simultaneously, which could be said to be completely contradictory to all of those, without negating any of those. Because it has no contradiction, it has no opposition within it. And one of the mantras you could say about reality is that difference is sameness in reality. And try to make sense of that.
There's incredible pleasure in understanding or being at peace with something.
Absolutely. This really enjoys its own richness, its own subtlety, its own infinite bounty, you could say.
That's a good practice. To notice how this is enjoying itself and try to participate in that.
It is, it totally is. I mean, you know, it's the joy of experiencing. Experience feels yummy just by its very self. And even if you have portions of experience that you're used to classifying as not feeling yummy, you can ignore that. Find the portions that obviously do feel delicious, and just feel that deliciousness. And you'll notice that deliciousness is just in the presence of the thing itself, you know, irrationally, without needing to make sense of it or get a handle on it or anything. And the more you acquire skill in that or comfort in that, the more you'll notice that even things you're used to qualifying as not enjoyable actually have the same quality. You know, there's an existential joy of experience. You know, and we all experience this, even if, you know, you have a pain and there's a perverse kind of a urge to keep tweaking the pain over and over. You ever have a sore tooth and you poke the tooth and say, boy, that hurts. And then you poke it again and say, yep, still hurts. And you poke it again and it's like, why don't you stop poking it? Well, you like to poke it because the pain is fun, it's interesting, it's stimulating. Or you smell a bad smell, you know, and what do? You smell it again, it's like, yep, still there, still smells horrible.
Or you watch the news instead of turning it off.
Well, that's if you're a real pervert.
Yeah, so.
That's the low water mark. Might say high water mark. Mere pain or ugliness is nothing compared to that.
There's a perverse pleasure of, oh, when is it going to unravel completely? With the Trump thing, right?
Well, I mean, curiosity, the joy and excitement of seeing the unexpected continually take form in every instant. You don't know what's going to happen next. You never know what's going to happen next, and that somehow is exciting. It's beautiful. It's fascinating. I mean, even just moment to moment, let alone in terms of big events or events that you're qualifying as being events. You know, every instant is unexpected. You don't know exactly what you're going to be seeing or thinking or feeling in the next moment, or in 5 minutes, or in an hour. And that's fun. It's exciting. It's exhilarating. It's fascinating.
What about like the resistance to experience, like procrastination? So that's just
Procrastination isn't necessarily resistance to experience. Procrastination is resistance to an interpreted structure.
so there's an interpretation of, oh, this is going to be a lot of work, or this is going to be unpleasant, or right? And then
Sure.
there's a resistance to that.
Sure. It's a passive aggressive motive trying to change your orientation. You don't actually change it, you just sort of drag your heels.
It's like today I could have done some work that would have been mildly unpleasant and tiring. And then I was like, oh, but I could do some gardening. That's
Or I could look on Facebook instead. Oh.
yeah. We had a lot of fun doing the gardening.
Yeah, nice. But that's less procrastination. That's more deliberately choosing an alternative orientation.
But at the same time, there's an interpretation that gardening is going to be fun, or it's going to get me out of pleasure temporarily of doing work.
Maybe, I don't know.
Well, it could just be a way. When I used to have to write on deadline, you know, I would do all kinds of things, like iron, you know.
Get things done.
You know, anything.
Get things done is a way to
to
procrastinate.
get that I have to do this out of my, just so I get more in a flow. But that's just a useful strategy. I mean, that you probably just picked up.
Or maybe it's just
You'll do the work, sooner or later, right? So.
Later.
Well, I have missed some deadlines. Let me put it that way.
Just as an exercise, I've been trying to let objects do noticing on themselves. And there are moments where I feel myself identify with a particular object. And yeah, I don't know if this is either memory or it doesn't even matter, but there are moments like, say, where I'm a squirrel or I'm an inanimate object, where there's a feeling of being, of taking form as a particular thing, but not this sort of like jumping out of the continuum that seems to occur like with this. So it seems on one hand like something can take form without interpretation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, all form is intrinsically without interpretation. Interpretation can be present and it can be claimed to be about the form, but in fact, all form, everything that is present in your sensory experience is just there without interpretation. Of course, and identification is like that. It's kind of arbitrary. So you can play with that. You can be. You don't have to be here. You can be there. Or that or whatever. And it's really just it's clear how slippery and arbitrary all that is, because the continuum. There's an absolute inclusiveness in the continuum. It's all you. So you can sort of partialize it or focus it however you want, and it doesn't change anything. But there's a different implication in terms of the textures. So what it feels like to be this body, or what it feels like to be, the carpet on the floor, is a whole different texture of presence, but it's all available.
It's very subtle, don't you think that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was just most excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good stuff. Charlie's no slouch.
It's ironic that it feels more freeing to be an inanimate object.
You think? I don't think so. Yeah, I'm constantly focusing on personalities are a pain in the ass.
I think anything like that really is the magic of presence. That being with is that recognition.
Yeah.
And it seems to have in the world of distinction and trying to figure things out, that process seems to have sort of healing or opening quality. But again, I think what it is just this already. This. So, and that doesn't have to be seen to be, how can I say it, known.
So any sort of interpretation is delusion and partialness. So if I say to myself, tiredness is arising, right? Or just the flavor of tiredness, right? That's already an interpretation.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's liable to become a hypnotic suggestion. Even if there is tiredness, there's also more than that. And as soon as you're calling it tiredness and holding it to actually be that to any degree, you're kind of you're claiming that it is that, and the consciousness will spontaneously and obligingly make that a self-fulfilling experience.
So how do you know when to go to sleep?
When you do. It's not that anything. It's not that that's evil. Just see it.
There's nothing wrong with being tired.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with hypnotizing yourself. Hypnosis is a very useful way of navigating. You know, if you become good at hypnosis, you'll be able to put yourself to, if some people have a hard time going to sleep, you'll be able to put yourself to sleep effortlessly, practically instantly. Or wake yourself up for that matter. Or virtually anything else. Hypnosis is a fun thing to play with, but the point is to see that in hypnosis, nothing is gained or lost. It's like changing the channels on your TV, but the TV's still on. The channels don't matter. It doesn't matter what experience looks like. It matters what it is. And it always is what it is, regardless of what it looks like. So you're free to play with what it looks like all you like. It's when you latch onto what it looks like and start thinking that's important, that's when you do it, that's when you're screwed. That's when you're setting yourself up for difficulty and frustration. When you see it doesn't matter what it looks like, then you become free of appearances, and then you're free to play with appearances and dance with appearances however you like, and you know that there's nothing at stake. There's nothing to be gained or lost. And on that note, good night.